Happy Friday, everybody. Today is August 14th, 2026, and this is your Friday planning video. Not long ago, I was sitting with a client reviewing his portfolio when he asked me a question that I've heard in one form or another for almost my entire career. He looked at me and he said, "Should we be doing something?" The interesting thing was that nothing had happened. There wasn't a major market decline. There wasn't a major economic event. There wasn't a change in his goals. In fact, if you looked at everything objectively, there wasn't an obvious reason to do anything at all. So I asked him a question. I said, "What exactly is making you feel like we should be doing something?" He thought about it for a moment, then he smiled. Honestly, he said, "I don't know." We both laughed, but I've thought about that conversation quite a bit since then because I think that it captures something that's true for most of us. Doing something feels productive, even when we aren't entirely sure what that something should be. A few days after that meeting, I found myself thinking about a project at home. Like most people, when I work on something, I like to see progress. I like checking things off a list. I like feeling as though I've moved something forward. The problem is that sometimes I reach a point where the smartest thing I can do is leave it alone for a while. And I don't particularly enjoy that part. I want to keep moving, adjusting, improving, but occasionally that project needs time more than it needs me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized investing can feel very similar. People often assume successful investing involves constant decision making, watching, reacting, adjusting, optimizing. But after doing this for more than 30 years, I've become convinced that one of the hardest parts of investing isn't knowing what to do. It's knowing when not to do anything. That thought reminded me of another client from years ago. He was an engineer by training, and one of the things I always appreciated about him was that the way he approached problems. If something wasn't working, he wanted to understand it. If something could be improved, he wanted to improve it. Those qualities had served him extremely well throughout his career. But one day he came into the office and he told me that he was struggling with his portfolio. Not because it was performing poorly, quite the opposite. He was doing fine. His challenge was that he felt disconnected from the process. There wasn't enough for him to do. I remembered laughing and telling him that might be the most engineer-like problem I've ever heard. Then I asked him something. I said, "If this portfolio required your attention every day, would that actually be a good thing?" He thought about it for a moment and admitted it probably wouldn't. The truth is that many of the systems we value most in life work quietly in the background. You don't think about the plumbing in your house until something goes wrong. You don't think about electricity until it stops working. You don't think about your retirement plan every day when it's functioning the way it should. And that's probably a good thing. The older I get, the more I believe that one of the purposes of planning is to reduce the number of decisions that have to be made in the future. A good plan creates freedom, not just financial freedom, mental freedom. It allows you to focus on your family, your work, your hobbies, your community, and the things that matter most without constantly wondering whether every headline requires a response. I think that's one of the reasons people sometimes struggle during calm periods. The absence of urgency creates space. And in that space, we begin looking for something to fix, something to improve, to optimize, something that's useful. But often it isn't. Sometimes the urge to act has more to do with our discomfort than with the situation itself. And that's a very important distinction. As I've reflected on that client conversation, I've realized that many of the best financial outcomes I've seen weren't created by extraordinary decisions. They were created by ordinary decisions that people stuck with long enough to allow them, they stuck with them long enough to allow them to work. That isn't always exciting, isn't always interesting, but is often effective. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today. Last week, we talked about boredom and how quiet periods can make people feel uneasy. This week, I take that one step further. Sometimes the challenge isn't the quiet itself. The challenge is resisting the temptation to fill the quiet with unnecessary activity. We've all seen this because not every situation requires action. Not every headline requires a response, and not every feeling requires a decision. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is nothing at all. And sometimes it's also the smartest. We want to talk about whether your financial plan still aligns with your goals and whether decisions you are making are being driven by strategy rather than emotion. I'm happy to have that conversation. For now, have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next week.